Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. Hey, I'm your friend. Yes, Emil Amok to you. Welcome to my takeout, my Emil Amok's takeout. You can come up to the sneeze plate, the glass, and just say and point at what you want, or just dig in and grab it, point, and go. Take it out, eat here, consume, go home. Emil Amok's takeout. My takes on all things considerable. I took yesterday off because, when it coincides with a big hearing, like we were waiting for the judge in the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case to decide how tough she was going to be on the Trump administration. Turns out she's going to be plenty tough, but she's civil. She said, hey, clear your calendars. We're going to go through this and we're going to find out what's going on. And the Trump administration still insists that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is going nowhere. That Kilmar Abrego Garcia is staying there in the prison. He deserves to be there because they say they can't show what the charges are. They'll say, well, previous judges said this in immigration courts. It's not public or whatever. The guy was protected by, the asylum process, and he was living here for the last 13 years. But the Trump administration insists that he's now a Salvadoran national, and it's up to President Bukele. And President Bukele, you saw the Dog and Pony show on Monday. He said, "Oh, I'm not smuggling him, this guy Garcia back in. My buddy Trump. I can't do that to Trump." So this is the constitutional crisis that we've been thinking about is going to happen, or this is as close as it gets, right? And now we just have to wait it out because the crisis is the courts say this, Trump ignores or Trump denies. That's the battle. It goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. And what will the Supreme Court justices say? They are a one-man order. It was Justice Roberts who said the U.S. has to facilitate in the return of Abrego Garcia. And then there's that other word that was used, effectuate. But look, they have to do something to bring him back. I mean, it's as simple as that. Abrego Garcia was wrongfully, mistakenly removed. And you can look at show 855. I talk about it there. So I knew that we would be right here in the same place, and we were just going to have to wait for justice, the wheels of justice to turn. Meanwhile, on the other case that Judge Boasberg is overseeing, the use of the Alien Enemies Act to send Venezuelan citizens back to not to Venezuela. They were sending him to El Salvador. That's how Abrego Garcia got mixed in on this. And apparently there is probable cause for contempt, because that's the next thing. You know what? You've heard me talk about this with Professor Daniel Phil Gonzalez on our previous shows. Yeah, contempt is the next thing. And then who's going to enforce the contempt charge? So this is all part of the constitutional crisis that we are facing on this one case. And of course, it is important to all of us because we can be Abrego Garcia. Abrego Garcia, the man who was taken while he was driving his 5-year-old kid who has autism. He was driving in Maryland. He was taken away from his kid. He was placed in the custody of ICE, put on a plane, deported. Maybe mistakenly, but now as he seeks redress, the Trump administration balks and says no. Even though They're under orders to facilitate his return. So this is, can it happen to a citizen? Well, yeah. The homegrown criminals, the Trump administration today said they are looking into it. They're looking into sending homegrown criminals, meaning United States citizens, not necessarily Salvadoran, not necessarily Venezuelan. They're just looking to send criminals, period, to an American gulag, essentially, right? That's what they're trying to do in Salvador. There was a tape where Trump is saying to Bukele during his visit here on Monday, hey, you better build 5 or 6 of these because we're not stopping here. They want to outsource all the, this is not unprecedented in U.S. history. Franklin Pierce wanted to make Cuba a slave state. Yeah, so, this is a way to use another country to be your, it's like Guantanamo, right? Or like another state to do the stuff that you don't want to do in America, to essentially create a constitution-free zone. Franklin Pierce didn't happen there with Cuba. But look, Donald Trump thinks it can happen with Salvador because he's got his prison. He's got a strongman, junior strongman dictator who's willing to do anything that Donald Trump wants, including evade and sidestep the Constitution, which is what we have here. So, all right. So I wasn't going to get into this immediately, but people are still talking about it. Listen to show 855. Also see my column on the Inquirer.net. I write about it. My column, Inquirer.net, where I talk about, I go back to the order that was written by Justice Roberts and had a note attached to it written by Justice Sonia Sotomayor, also with Elena Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson signing on, to the note that said, if Donald Trump can get away with this, the implication is, their logic is they can put any U.S. citizen in this prison, the Salvadoran prison. And if it's a mistake, hey, there's really no recourse. Hey, you're in the custody of Salvador. Well, if it was a U.S. citizen, I'm not sure. We'd have to go. I mean, when a U.S. citizen is in trouble in a foreign country, they go to the embassy, right? I mean, it would be similar to that, except here, if they know that you're in Bukele's gulag, they may do nothing. Anyway, this is a process. We're going to have to see. But remember, when you see Kilmar, Abrego, Garcia, insert your name, because it could be you. It could be you. Some other things I want to talk about. If you're in the Northern California area, well, you know that election in Oakland, Barbara Lee was running against Lauren Taylor, former city council person. Barbara Lee, the former member of Congress, stalwart member of Congress, stalwart progressive. She's losing. In the first go-round in the counting, they're going to count and count slowly. The next count will be revealed on Friday, but it's going to be slow. There's like under 50,000 votes in this special election. And frankly, I don't know what this means, except that people just want change. People don't want the same old, same old. Although Taylor is former council person, he's not exactly a newbie, but it was with such a close race, and everyone thought this was going to be a coronation for the beloved former Congresswoman, Barbara Lee, who has, come in, she came in and has had a great career after coming in and, in place of Ron Dellums, another East Bay stalwart, congressional stalwart, progressive. And I don't know. The race is closer. So we'll have to follow that and see. But I have to admit, I'm kind of surprised. I'm surprised that it was closer. I'm surprised that, well, it was it was a very quiet campaign. I know most people probably didn't know there was going to be a special election in Oakland. If you weren't living precisely in Oakland. And frankly, my attention has been on the larger story, the story of our country. Because our country, look, Oakland's not so great, but our country is in worse trouble, I think. All right, as a columnist, I always say, well, what kind, in the old days, and one of the reasons why I was prone to column writing, because I saw what happened when I read a column in the newspaper. I'd want to cut it out, right, snip it with the scissors, put it on your refrigerator so all can see and say, yeah, look, I know that Donald Trump has bastardized the term common sense, but this is common sense. This is what's happened. This is what I'm feeling. I'm writing about it, about what's in the news. Here's my feelings. Don't you see it? Don't you feel it? Right? That's why column writing was appealing to me, because I could take facts, I could report them, but also talk about it in the context of being a Filipino-American, Asian-American human being in the 20th century, now the 21st century. And that's why I've been writing columns for since 1995, once a week on Asian American affairs. I've written op-eds since 91, but on a regular basis in some form of the ethnic media, some form of media, I put them out. And that's where my writing has been, writing columns. So I'm thinking about where we are in the world right now, and then I come across this column that Tom Friedman wrote today. I have never been more afraid for my country's future. He writes that, and I said, well, Tom, I got to write another column. Tom Friedman has already written it. So I'm going to share what Friedman said, because it's an important column. If you're feeling kind of funny about where we are in the world, if you feel sort of just a little odd, awkward, I'm feeling FU, that's my term. I'm feeling uncertain about everything, right? About the markets, about our democracy. And so I'm thinking, I got to write about how I'm feeling this way. And then Friedman writes, I have never been more afraid for my country's future. And he lays it out. He says, so much crazy happens with the Trump administration every day that some downright weird but incredible telling stuff gets lost in the noise. And he points out how April 8th, the White House, we're in the middle of this raging trade war. Our president decided it was the perfect time to sign an executive order to bolster coal mining. And Friedman talks about, he quotes Trump. He says, we're bringing back an industry that was abandoned. Trump is surrounded by coal miners and hard hats, a workforce that has declined from 70,000 to about 40,000 over the last decade. And Trump says, we're going to put the miners back to work. You can give them a penthouse on Fifth Avenue and a different kind of job, and they'd be unhappy, said Trump. They want to mine coal. That's what they love to do. And Friedman says it's commendable that the president honors men and women who work with their hands, but when he singles out coal miners for praise, while he tries to zero out development of clean tech jobs from his budget. I mean, in 2023, the U.S. wind industry employed 130,000 workers. That's double the coal miners, triple if it's down to 40,000. Solar industry employed 280,000. Friedman says it suggests that Trump is trapped in a right-wing woke ideology that doesn't recognize green manufacturing jobs as real jobs. How is that going to make us stronger? Friedman writes, this whole Trump 2 administration is a cruel farce. Trump ran for another term not because he had any clue how to transform America for the 21st century. He ran in order to stay out of jail and to get revenge on those who, with real evidence, had tried to hold him accountable to the law. I doubt he has ever spent 5 minutes studying the workforce of the future. Friedman goes on. He then returned to the White House, his head still filled with ideas out of the 1970s, and that's being nice, because most of his ideas come from the 1870s to 1930. In the White House, he launched a trade war with no allies and no serious preparation, which is why he changes his tariffs almost every day. And there's no understanding of how much the global economy is now a complex ecosystem in which products are assembled from components from multiple countries. And then he has this war carried out by a commerce secretary who thinks millions of Americans are dying to replace Chinese workers screwing in little screws to make iPhones. But this farce is about to touch every American. By attacking our closest allies, Canada, Mexico, Japan, South Korea, and the European Union, and our biggest rival, China, at the same time, Trump makes clear he favors Russia over Ukraine and prefers climate-destroying energy industries over future-oriented ones. The planet be damned. Trump is triggering a serious loss of global confidence in America. See, this is what's happening with the tariffs. People see America acting erratically. This is me now, commenting on Friedman. They see America acting erratically, and they say, what's going on here? Now, I've said this in my column, and now Friedman's saying it in his. The world is now seeing Trump's America for exactly what it is becoming. A rogue state led by an impulsive strongman, disconnected from the rule of law and other constitutional American principles and values. That one paragraph says it all. America is the rogue state, not the leader of the free world, the rogue state, led by an impulsive strongman disconnected from the rule of law and other constitutional American principles and values. I mean, this is Thomas Friedman writing. So he talks about how the U.S., how people don't buy T-bills and look at bonds as much as they used to. In fact, they're selling them off. And Friedman says, so America has to offer them higher rates of interest to do so, which will ripple through our entire economy from car payments to home mortgages to the cost of servicing our national debt at the expense of everything else. We got to make the bond market more interesting because people are selling them off. They don't trust America. They're selling off the market. They're selling off the bonds. And Friedman even quotes the Wall Street Journal. Are President Trump's herky-jerky decision-making and border taxes causing the world's investors to stay away or shy away from the dollar and U.S. treasuries? The second thing, Friedman says, that our allies are doing, they're losing faith in our institutions. The Financial Times reported Monday that the European Union's governing commission is issuing burner phones and basic laptops to U.S.-bound staff to avoid the risk of espionage, a measure traditionally reserved for trips to China. What's that mean? Yeah, you go to China, they're going to spy on you. But now our allies are worried, and they've got burner phones and basic laptops that they can destroy as they go because they don't trust the rule of law in America anymore. The rule of law, right? Remember when I was talking about Abrego Garcia a second ago and the Trump administration? Even though there's an order from the Supreme Court saying, hey, you didn't follow due process for this guy. Do what you will in terms of foreign policy, but every person deserves due process. You didn't give it to him, bring him back. That's the rule of law. And the Trump administration is thumbing its nose at the rule of law. And then Friedman says the third thing he notices that people are saying and doing, they tell if he's abroad, foreign, overseas, he notices people in China when he was there, that people are saying maybe it's no longer a good idea to study in America. The reason, they don't know when their kids might be arbitrarily arrested, when their family members might get deported to Salvadoran prisons. And we know this is the case, right? We got people who were involved in protests who are being rounded up and being held, deported. The woman from the Turkish student from Tufts, who's being held in a Louisiana detention camp. We got another guy from two guys from Colombia, right? So, and this is happening all across the country. And Friedman asks, is this irreversible? And he says this. He says, all I know for sure today is that somewhere out there, as you read this, is someone like Steve Jobs' Syrian birth father, who came to our shores in the 1950s to get a PhD at the University of Wisconsin, someone who is planning to study in America. Is he now looking to go to Canada or Europe instead? Considering the uncertainty of America, the likelihood is high. Now, I know for me, my father wasn't a PhD candidate. He was a farm boy in the Philippines. But he came in 1928 because no matter how bad the Philippines was, no matter how bad the Depression was in America, it was still better than the Philippines. He was still willing to come and seek his fortune, start his family. He wasn't concerned about the rule of law, but he was jacked around by how the law was applied to him, a colonized Filipino. So, to get back to Friedman's point, we're just in this kind of America where we just are essentially empowering our main enemy, and that's China. Because China is they've prepared for this sort of thing. They've got a plan called Made in China 2025. It's a strategy. And Friedman writes, if Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent really believes what he foolishly said, that Beijing is just playing with a pair of twos, then somebody please let me know when it's poker night at the White House, because I want to buy in. China has built an economic engine that gives it options, more options than the U.S. And he says the question for Beijing and the rest of the world is, how will China use all the surpluses it has generated? Will it invest them in making a more menacing military? Will it invest them in more high-speed rail lines and 6-lane highways to cities that don't need them. But that's one thing that China and Asia does best. You go to an airport, you see the transit systems, you go to the highway systems. I mean, here we can't even build that bullet train to go from Stockton to Bakersfield, or Bakersfield to or Merced to Bakersfield. We're not even hitting the big cities. Friedman asks, will China invest in more domestic consumption and services while offering to build the next generation of Chinese factories and supply lines in America and Europe with 50-50 ownership structures? We need to encourage China to make the right choices, but at least it has choices. He's talking about a global world of cooperation. We're not seeing that cooperation from the Trump administration. We're seeing a mean and scowling Trump, mean to our friends, our allies, alienating them, alienating everyone. And to our enemies are enemies. Well, the perceived enemy, Russia, is actually closer to Trump. Friedman writes, compare that with the choices Trump is making. He's undermining our sacred rule of law. He's tossing away our allies. He's undermining the value of the dollar. He's shredding any hope of national unity. I joked, hey, national unity. Here are tariffs. You voted for Trump, you get screwed. You didn't vote for Trump, you get screwed. Unity! Oh, I don't think that's what he thought. Friedman says, Trump's even got Canadians now boycotting Las Vegas because they don't like to be told we will soon own them. So you tell me who's playing with a pair of twos. If Trump doesn't stop his rogue behavior, and this is Friedman's bottom line, if Trump doesn't stop his rogue behavior, he's going to destroy all the things that made America strong, respected, and prosperous. I have never been more afraid for America's future in my life. That is Thomas Friedman, New York Times columnist, with my annotation. You can read it for yourself, but I read it to you because some people don't get they don't get the paywall, but I was going to write a column about what I think about the tariffs, but you can see what I think about the tariffs if you go to Inquirer.net and put my name in and see the collection of my columns there. But I saw this article or this column by Friedman today, and from the first sentence, so much crazy happens with the Trump administration every day that some downright weird but incredibly telling stuff gets lost in the noise. And it's true. It just never stops. It never stops every day. There's something, and it's crazy. And I think it is, it's hurting us as a country. Anyway, read Friedman's column. And it will put some things in the kind of perspective that we need to just help us understand, well, how do we go about how do we challenge this? We heard from Cory Booker the other day. Well, elections have consequences, as they say, and we're living through the consequences. Pay attention, take it seriously. The other thing I want to talk about before I get out of here today, I want to talk about Harvard. And I talk about Harvard because, I've avoided it because it's my alma mater and I don't want to appear biased. But there are other reporters who went to Harvard in the national media. They're writing about it. They're talking about it. So this is not a bias. I'm just talking about it objectively as an American. But I do want to say that Harvard deserves to be praised for taking a stand at a Trump administration that wants to curtail the freedom of academic speech, an extension of the First Amendment, that wants to take over the university in all it does, all its endeavors. It wants to take away its right to hire who it wants, to put into its school who they want. They want total control over what is taught, what is said. It has a problem with, they say, it's anti-Semitism. Harvard has no problem with anti-Semitism, but from Harvard's perspective, they were dealing with free speech on campus, and free speech on campus allows for a certain amount of speech to take place, some of which may not agree with the administration. But when it comes to anti-Semitism, I think the university and the Trump administration agree on what is anti-Semitism. It's just that the Trump administration is being disingenuous when it says it's trying to stop anti-Semitism, when it fully embraces anti-Semitic January 6 folks like the Proud Boys, like, some of the MAGA people out there. I mean, how can you on one hand take the law, turn it on its head and say, oh, these January 6 folks, they're all pardoned. And then you come with a sledgehammer after Harvard's constitutional rights, its academic freedom rights. Doesn't make sense. And so this happened on Monday, where Harvard stood up. And I actually was very proud of Harvard, but I did want to speak immediately, because I've had, my issues with Harvard. I haven't always been 100% backing them. But I will say this. When they admitted me to their freshman class the year I applied, it changed my life. And to the better. I mean, I did not go into the traditional fields that people would say, oh, well, certainly, law, business, finance. No. But I became a better me. I didn't really understand that until much later. And I rebelled against Harvard throughout the time I've been associated with it. As a student who dropped out, as a student who returned, as a student who graduated, as an alum. But now, with hindsight and wisdom, I see that it made me a better me. And I know I may not have had the chance to experience the school were it not for their view that the university should look like America. And as they opened up, and they opened up more, we've developed this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. And what do you know? What do you think was really the main thrust of the reforms that the government wanted to see? They said anti-Semitism, but that was the pretext. They really wanted to go after DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, in the same way that it goes after DEI in every department in the government. I mean, that fiasco about removing just historical aspects, from websites, taking down the Enola Gay because someone thought it was homophobic or someone thought it was pro-gay. Ridiculous things like that. Just really, they're doing it wholesale throughout the government now as a way just to erase, the efforts to bring America out of the dark ages into the light, and with it, all its people. So I praise Harvard because, I was one of the first group of people to go to Harvard from, who are Filipino and not patricians who lived in the Philippines, but just working class people from urban centers like San Francisco. One of the first. I mean, if civil rights was a thing, 65 to 75, 10 years, take it to 85, 20 years, they're still trying to figure out what does it mean to be diverse, to be inclusive. I was in that wave of kids. And now it's to the point where, when Asian Americans were just less than 5% of the entire student body. And that would include foreign students. Today, Asian Americans are something like high 30s to 40% of the student body. That's diversity. That's also meritocracy. Now, there were some lawsuits over that. Harvard has abided by the lawsuit. But I think in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I can't fault it. And so when I saw the Trump administration go after the university for DEI programs, I thought, I wondered what Harvard would do. They lost the affirmative action case, but would they capitulate? And thank goodness they didn't. Thank goodness Harvard didn't. And that came down on Monday, and it came down in an email from a guy who's now the president of Harvard, who was in my Harvard class. I was proud of that. I mean, the position of president of Harvard has never been more political. Claudine Gay found that out. But Alan Garber has been pretty adept at walking through just the landmines that exist, right? So I don't envy him, but I will say this. I like Alan, and I've met him. I saw him the very month after the October 7th attacks, and Harvard was really under the gun. Well, what is it going to do? Because it didn't put out anything initially, right? It's slow response. They were criticized for. I happened to be in Cambridge that week, and he came to an alumni event, an Asian alumni event, and he came up, and he came to me first. I went to him to say hello. I was going to go to him to say hi, but he initiated the conversation, and he remembered me, or maybe he just read some of the things I've written in the class reports. But he was cordial. He was appreciative of my being there as just an Asian American at Harvard. And it meant something. Now, this is not akin to Bill Maher having dinner with President Trump. but maybe a little bit. Because, like I said, Garber's in some things that I don't agree with 100%. He hasn't done things that I would like him for him to do. But on this, he's right on point. And I think it's important to go once again to a New York Times editorial. The editorial today in the Times just lays it out. And if you're wondering, what's the big deal about Harvard standing up? Harvard standing up to Trump is important because no one else seems to want to stand up to Harvard, except some members of the immigrant community, some, who else? Is there anyone else? He's gone after the immigrant community. He's gone after universities. Most universities have capitulated. He's gone after big law firms. Most of them have capitulated. So the New York Times editorial board wrote this. Harvard refused on Monday to submit to the Trump administration's quest to command and control America's higher education system. Now, I'll annotate this. You might think, come on, what's the big deal about the higher education? This is everything. This is how smart we are as a country. You may not want to go to college. You may not want to go to the best college, but it says something when our institution is one of the oldest colleges in the world. It says something about our standards. It says something about how smart we are as a country. And I'm not putting down anyone who does not go to a 4-year college. In fact, I'm all for 2-year community colleges. I'm all for opening up Harvard more, and Harvard did. It's free to families who make under $200,000 a year. It's essentially a public school. But the first sentence of this editorial speaks to the importance of this. Harvard refused to submit to the Trump administration's quest to command and control America's higher education system. Its president, Alan Garber, wrote this to indicate the principle at stake in remaining independent of the government's edicts. Quote, no government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. This was in Garber's public letter that took a stand against government overreach into academic freedom. Key word, government overreach. That's what you're seeing. Government overreach, academic freedom, government overreach in terms of power. What is its executive power versus the power of Congress? Only Congress can levy taxes. So why is President Trump trying to levy a tax through tariffs? He can't do that, can he? Not by the Constitution. The executive branch has its powers specified in the Constitution. Article 1. Congress, Article 2. The judiciary, Article 3. When the judiciary is a check and balance on all the others, tells the executive branch what to do, and the executive branch says, hey, I'm not going to listen to you. In the case of Abrego, Garcia, it's overstepped its bounds. The courts rein them in. But when Trump says no, constitutional crisis. That's where we're at. So that's really shows you the depth of this problem when you see how it extends from the Abrego Garcia case to the Harvard case. Back to the editorial. Harvard became the first university to officially resist the administration's abusive intimidation, and it is urgent that it not be the only one. Its actions, supported in recent weeks in statements by other academic leaders, including the presidents of Princeton and Wesleyan, light the way forward on a vital path to fighting President Trump's war on the independence of higher education. Its example should also offer encouragement to those states fighting a similarly coercive cutoff of federal aid to law firms facing a loss of business from the president's campaign of retribution, to every group challenging unconstitutional actions in court, to the public square, and ultimately to voters at the ballot box. There will be attempts to do things that are against the Constitution. That's what makes this administration particularly lawless. And it's up to the executive branch to listen to how the judiciary views it, how Congress views it. That's the checks and balances, right? And when it comes to universities, well, Harvard said no to the administration and its demands. Back to the editorial. Nearly immediately after Harvard's lawyers made its refusal public in a letter rejecting the government's long list of demands, the Trump administration announced it would freeze more than $2.2 billion in Harvard's federal grants and contracts. Academic leaders around the country might be staggered by the prospect of losing even a fraction of that kind of money. But Harvard made it clear that it wasn't taking its stand simply because its $53 billion endowment gave its resources to do so. Yeah, it's got $53 billion, but here's why it's important. Giving in to the unreasonable demands of the Trump administration would shatter an engine of American culture, as many academic leaders are beginning to recognize. Less wealthy colleges should also follow Harvard's example, even though it could come at a high cost. They may have to choose between losing their federal grants and losing their souls, and the choice, painful as it may be, is clear. You don't give in to the bully, Donald Trump. The bottom line, fear is a formidable tool, and it is the principal weapon the administration has used to bully immigrants, law firms, and centrist Republicans into submission. Those are the three: the immigrants, right, like Abrego, Garcia; law firms, the big law firms are saying, yeah, we'll give you pro bono work. Giving Trump, he's got billions, giving him pro bono work. They should be doing the work for the immigrants. Centrist Republicans, they're the cowards in Congress who just capitulate to Trump. But the New York Times opinion, the editorial board says, but universities, which have for generations taught their students the principles of American democracy and the long, dark history of authoritarian rule around the world, are supposed to know better. Oh, yeah. We're all supposed to know better. If they follow Harvard's example and refuse to be intimidated by unjust abuses of power, they may inspire other fundamental national institutions to do the same. And that basically is the importance of saying no to standing up to an abuse, an unjust abuse of power. We're looking at Harvard as inspiration to stand up ourselves. That's what it boils down to. Other universities say they may not be able to afford to do it, but I dare say if they don't do it, they're going to lose their soul. They're going to lose their soul. So, those are some of the things I read today. Thank goodness I had a Warrior game to watch last night just to take things off my mind. Tough. I don't know if the Warriors, Steph Curry, banged up thumb. You see how hard he works for a shot? He's got to like run around the. He has to run all over the half court looking for screens to get open, and the ball comes to him, and he's got to take every shot because he can make them. Well, when he's on. But it's true. If Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler, if they're the Batman and Robin, Butler says Curry's Batman and he's Robin. He is Robin. He gets beat up and goes to the line. Curry can't go to the line to save his life. I mean, they don't call fouls. I mean, some, but not like Jimmy Butler. Butler goes in, he drives hard, he gets fouls called, so he goes to the line and shoots free throws. But Stephen Curry, oh my God, he gets mugged. Every 10 seconds he gets mugged. And then they don't call it on the young guys. They always call it on Draymond Green, though. The difference is, I think, is going to be if the young guy, and they're not counting my favorite, Jonathan Kuminga. They're benching him. And they need Kuminga. Although I like Gary Payton the second. Kuminga's just a little bigger and more twitchy athletic. And you need him to go up against the Rockets, the next opponent. But I don't know what's going to happen. I love Moses Moody, but very erratic shot-wise. Podziemski, same thing. When they're hot, the Warriors win. When they're not, and it's just Curry and Butler, they're going to have a hard time. And these guys are in the late third, 37 for Curry, right? I think the most valuable thing in the Warrior locker room is that ice bath. So I hope they win. I've been rooting for the Warriors all my life. Wilt Chamberlain, I remember going to the games at San Francisco Civic Auditorium when I was a kid. By myself. I'd go by myself. I was like 10 years old. Love the Warriors. Saw Rick Barry play there. Saw Nate Thurman. Saw Wilt Chamberlain before Thurman. When there were just 3,000 people, right, in that arena. Now, tickets are hard to get. I don't need to sit on the front row. I used to get press tickets. That was cool. But now it's almost fun just to watch them. Spare me the traffic jam, the parking jam, and I'll just watch at home. And it's just as nerve-wracking, just as entertaining. I'm rooting for the Warriors. All right. Yeah, that's it. I'll end it here because these things shouldn't go too long. But I wanted just to let it out. It's Wednesday. It's Holy Wednesday. Time to go to church. Are you one of those? Easter, Christmas Christian? Are you? So I'm going to tell some jokes tonight. That's what I talk about the news by day, and at night I tell jokes. That's how I deal with this. Anyway, on Harvard, read Tom Friedman's column on, why he's scared. On Harvard, read the Times editorial. Also, an excellent piece written by some reporters, just straight report, why Harvard decided to fight Trump. And basically, it says that they understood that combating anti-Semitism was just a pretext for what the Trump administration really wanted to do. And that is the Trump administration wanted to reshape the school's operations, admissions, hiring, faculty, and student life. And they couldn't do it. Harvard couldn't do it. It's untenable. It's like Donald Trump wanting to take over the Kennedy Center. Although with more repercussions. I mean, the Kennedy Center is important. But Harvard's been here, since 1630. I should know this, right? It's in the alumni handbook. 1630 something. And it's contributed. I mean, Harvard has this website, talks about all the things it's done besides giving me a spot in the freshman class in the 70s. But MRIs, EKGs, Harvard. Laser tattoo removal. I know you're saying, oh, wow, that's Harvard. Yeah, that's why, when they take out the tattoo, it leaves a big, almost like a translucent H on my skin. No, that's the guy who's doing it. So Garber's letter, they took out bits of Harvard's letter. This is in the New York Times piece versus the editorial, which I read. They quoted from Garber. I have Garber's letter. He sent it to everyone in the university. But this line is the summary. The university will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. And that's what you need to know. And they'll take away the money. They don't even know. They're threatening with money, $2.2 billion. Initially, they're going to suspend. They've threatened Harvard's tax-exempt status, which Donald Trump can't do. Only Congress can do that. Once again, separation of powers, but it's important. This is why it's unconstitutional, what Trump is asking. But anyway, check that out. It's in the New York Times. All right. All right, so I get worked up. It's Holy Week. And we're going to end today with a little meditation, a little loving kindness. Because notice, look, I don't hate Trump. He's my president. I like him. I'm rooting for him. I want him to win. I just want him to win smart. I don't want him to win dumb. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time. Mahal